What's up, guys? It's Josh Lau here with TheCardGuyz, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys my deck tech and battle report for my Dorinthea Iron Song deck that I played at US Nationals 2023. I went 11-3 overall on the weekend and managed to get 14th place. So yeah, we're going to go through the deck, and then we're going to talk about the matchups that I had for the weekend. For those of you who want the deck list, it's up on screen now. If you want to hear a little bit more about all the card choices and why I pick things, stay tuned. But before we jump into the deck tech, I just want to thank a few of our sponsors that made the trip to Las Vegas possible. FABREC.gg, Card Culture, and Dragon Shield. We also have a Patreon, TheCardGuyz Patreon. There's some cool benefits there. Also some access to, sideboard guides and stuff like that. The sideboard guide for this deck will be there. So if you want access to that, you can join in the link below. We also have a Discord where we, chit-chat about the game. It's a very, very lively and fun place to be. So if you want to join that, that's free to join as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the deck before I talk about the specific, show you guys the specific things. So this metagame was fairly difficult for me to pick a Dorinthea deck for. There are 5 main heroes that all demand different approaches. So the 5 heroes that I'm talking about are Lexi, Icelander, Dromai, Bravo, and who am I missing here? Briar. The reason why they're very, very complicated to deal with is, first of all, let's talk about the big bad in the room. Lexi was the most represented deck, and this is a deck that demands that you run a deck that has a certain level of aggression, and your deck needs to block fairly well because oftentimes you don't see your power cards until turn 4. So you have to be able to withstand the first couple turns from Lexi. Then you have decks like Icelander. They demand that you run a high blue count. They demand that you run fewer of the front pumps. So against Lexi, front pumps are better. Against Icelander, back pumps are better. So back pumps are reactions. Front pumps are things like Sharpened Steel, Warrior's Valor, Glistening Steelblade, right? So you already have to approach those 2 matchups in kind of completely different ways. Then you have Bravo, who is going to generally be very, very defensive. So you need a solution for that. So generally luckily we got a new weapon. So spoiler alert, the Decimated Great Axe is in this deck, and it is for Bravo. So you need a certain amount of speed with the Great Axe because you don't want the game to go too long in general. You have decks like Briar where they could be playing multiple styles. There were 3 different styles that I saw over the weekend. There's the traditional Briar deck that's running a lot of the 0-for-4s. They're playing Channel Mount Heroic, and they're trying to get a good turn off with Channel Mount Heroic involving their Snapdragons, trying to be very efficient with Tunic. There's a arcane version of Briar that's trying to maintain embodiments, as well as just trying to play a little bit more defensively. And then obviously we have the full fatigue Briar running Reaping Blade, lots of 2-card 7s, and trying to play very, very defensively. The approach to all those decks is a little bit different as well for Dorinthea, so that's kind of hard to deal with. Finally, we have Dromai. There are 2 versions of the Dromai. Both you need to be fairly aggressive into. So that kind of lines up with Lexi, but it kind of doesn't because you need a lot more go again against Dromai than you need against Lexi. Because the game tends to go longer against Dromai, even though you want it to go quicker. So yeah, that was there's a very, very complicated situation for the metagame. So I went through, many different builds of the deck. And eventually I came to a list that I thought could handle those 5 matchups pretty well as being able to deal with any rogue matchups that I saw. So yeah, let's take a look at the deck now, and we'll come back and talk about the specific matchups that I had. All right, guys, let's just jump into it here. So this is the deck that I took to US Nationals. For those of you who are familiar with my style of deck techs, I like to have a main board and a sideboard. So this is the main board. These are the 56 cards that I play in every single matchup. And I've sort of laid them out here in what I think is a somewhat logical way to do so. So let us start with what I consider to be the threats of the deck. But I guess before we start, let me talk in generalities here. So this deck was tuned to combat Lexi, Icelander, Briar, Dromai, Bravo. These are the 5 decks that myself and my teammates thought would be the most represented at the US Nats. And spoiler alert, they were. So a lot of the card choices here are dictated primarily on those 5 matchups. There's a lot of very specific ratios that I will talk about. And yeah, so this is, I think, this is the configuration to deal with the what I like to call the winner's metagame, right? So, all right, so let's start off with our threats here. So in terms of threats, we have our classics: Warrior's Valor, Spoils of War. We also have 2 copies of the yellow here. These threaten your hero ability, which is very relevant in many matchups, and they allow you to snowball counters. Warrior's Valor gives a little bit of a larger buff than Spoils of War, but Spoils of War obviously combines with Twinning Blade, combines with Command and Conquer, combines with E-Pot as well. And, we're happy with conditional or unconditional go again. In general, we want to have a go again in every single hand. So classics like that. Okay, next we have Steelblade Supremacy. Obviously, this is one of the best cards in the deck. This is basically this plus Glistening Steelblade is what allows you to compete with Lexi in the current metagame. And this is extremely powerful if you are able to set up a triple hit combo. Pairs very nicely with Iron Song Determination, pairs well with the multitude of attack reactions here. But it is a card that loses its power the later in the game it goes, because you can't keep 5-card hands. And the less cards that you have in hand, the easier it is to defend against Steelblade Supremacy. In terms of usage, generally you're going to want to use this with your equipment if you're going for a triple hit combo. Generally, your third hit will rely, or your third attack is going to rely on bolters being used. And, depending on your blue situation and whether or not you have an E-Pot out, you probably will need to pop Courage as well to execute a triple hit combo. But yeah, good turns start with Steelblade Supremacy in general. Down here we have 2 copies of Iron Song Determination. So this is a card that I was on 3 of. Those of you who have been around for a long time know that I did not like this card in the past, but the metagame has evolved a little bit, and this is a good card for protecting the counters. So oftentimes you'll get counters with Glistening. The best card to see on the following turn is a Iron Song Determination. Also allows a very easy combo with Warrior's Valor or any of our threats if they have low amounts of armor. And it's a good closing card. It's a card we don't really want to... I cut it from 2 to 3 because we kind of needed to make room for other things. And it wasn't super important to see it turn 0 against Lexi anymore. Because Lexi, in the previous metagame, for those of you who have watched my overpowered RTN video, that was when Lexi was running Bullseye Bracer Snapdragons into every single game, and now they're running Hornet Sting plus the Perch Grapplers. So they actually have access to a decent amount of armor, so this is like less good on turn 0. Oftentimes against Lexi, you're just passing priority if you're going first and daring them to load an arrow. Okay, so those are the threats over there. Again, I talked about 2 copies of Yellow Warrior's Valor. This is just an effect that you want a lot of. It's useful against Dromai. It's useful in the aggro matchups. It's useful in the control matchups because you're able to, say, hey, if you don't have a D-React, things are going to get out of control here. Glistening Steelblade, this is probably it's tied for the strongest card with Steelblade Supremacy. This is a card that you basically, against Lexis, you basically have to wait until you see one of these cards before you go. Because a sample hand of blue plus Iron Song Response plus Warrior's Valor is just not good enough against those type of decks. So you're playing very, very defensively until you see one of these 6 cards. And then you'll basically, try to make a move there. This card combines very excellently with Twinning Blade, with Singing Steelblade. Obviously combines well with all your pumps. And it's a extremely threatening card. In general, your success is pretty heavily dictated whether or not you see this card early or not. We got 2 copies of Run Through. I've been waffling between 0 to 3. I found that 2 feels just right. Excellent against Dromai, great against decks that don't really like to block. And it also, just having them in your list makes them unsure of whether it's Run Through or Glint. Against decks with high armor, though, I would probably be blocking with the Run Throughs. Up next, we have Singing Steelblade. This is a defining card in Dorinthea, and one of the reasons people don't want to give you Reprise. And is also one of the reasons why we're running, we have 5 1-ofs here. Being able to tutor for things is extremely strong. The most common targets are your 0-cost cards, like Iron Song Response, your 1-cost cards that allow you to go to 5, so Singing Steelblade plus Puncture is plus 5. Singing Steelblade into Glint, if they're blocking, let's say you're attacking for 6, and they block for 6, Singing Steelblade into Glint is a great way to get over that. Plus it also draws you a card, so even if they have a D-React, you can Arsenal that card most of the time. And then obviously Singing Steelblade into Twinning Blade is a massive blowout a lot of the time. Because this deck is running a pretty high blue count, there are many scenarios where you're able to go Singing Steelblade into Overpower, Singing Steelblade into Route to end the game. You can even go Singing Steelblade into Chorus of Iron Song in those very, very specific situations where you need unpreventable Dawnblade damage. Late game, if you're running low on your red attack reactions, you can grab a blue Overpower. Even a blue Iron Song Response oftentimes gets the job done. Great card. A card that you're definitely going to want to maintain a copy of in your deck at all times, just to create some ambiguity to your attack patterns. Over here we have 3 copies of Twinning Blade. Twinning Blade is an extremely important card. This is a card that allows you to go around blocks, and it creates some of the biggest blowout turns. We have a lot of unconditional go again in the deck, and being able to go around a overblock is extremely powerful. This also is the only way for the deck to attack 3 times in a turn, and attacking 3 times in a turn is often what you need to do against decks like Lexi and Briar. This also allows you to set up very, very strong turns against defensive decks as well. If you have an E-Pot and a Twinning Blade, you can often combine it with a source of go again plus your boots for a triple hit combo. All right, so we talked about the threats. We talked about some of the yellow attack reactions. Let's talk about the core attack reaction suite here, which is in the middle. So we're running a very, very particular set of attack reactions because we have to bring the correct tools to battle. And this is the ratios and cards that I picked. Let's dive into that now. So we have 3 copies of Red Iron Song Response here. Sometimes I go down to 2, but I think this is a metagame where you're very, very likely to get reprise, and having 3 copies is quite important. You're also very likely to get taxed. So, you know, the difference between 0 and 1 is quite massive. So because we're likely to get reprise and we're likely to be taxed, this Iron Song Response is now 3 of. We have 3 copies of Puncture. Armor is very prevalent in every single deck, top tier deck now. Lexi has armor. Icelander has, you know, Cornet, Peak plus Gauntlet. Dromai has Furnace, Crown. Briar has the Fridge. And Bravo obviously has a ton of armor as well. So Puncture is an excellently positioned card. Like I said before, say you Steelbladed to Puncture, it's a +5. So that gets around the plethora of 0 for 4 D-Reacts. It's a extremely important card. You generally aren't going to be playing out all 3, but, you know, it's the earlier you see that, the better the game will go. We got 2 copies of Out for Blood here. It does its job. It gives +1 to the next attack if it has reprise. It's also unconditional. So unconditional pumps, I think, are a little bit more important now that Icelander is back in the metagame. And the previous metagame, the previous deck I made, that was during the Oldhim Lexi meta, and raw strength was way more important. Strength and efficiency was way more important. But now I would say flexibility is a little bit more important because of Icelander. So these 3 here are basically how I've tuned the deck towards Icelander a little bit. Obviously these kind of suck against 1 cost or 0 cost D-Reacts, but they just increase the density of D-Reacts, and Lexi doesn't obviously run any D-Reacts generally, so they're good enough. We play 1 copy of Stroke of Foresight just to mix up the ratios a little bit. You know, if it's late game and they see, you know, 2 copies of Out for Blood, they'll be like, oh, there could be a 3rd. If they see Stroke of Foresight, they're like, okay, there could be a 2nd or 3rd copy. Just keeps people guessing. All right, down here we have 4 other 1-ofs, and they are all extremely specialized. We have a single red overpower, a single yellow overpower, a single copy of Route, and a single copy of Chorus of Iron Song. So let me talk about each of these 4 here. So red and yellow overpower, they basically function the same. The only situations where they wouldn't would be against Unmovable, Staunch Response, or if people are blocking at +1, playing around Singing Steelblade, and they have a D-React. So those are the only 3 situations where it would really matter between 6 and 5 here. And it just creates some ambiguity to whether or not you're playing multiple overpowers, multiple yellow overpowers. And, you know, you're much happier to pitch your yellow overpower, so you maintain the yellow overpower in the deck, which is something that's very important, is having access to a big attack react for Singing Steelblade. And yellow overpower fits that very, very nicely. We got a copy of Route. Route ends games, and obviously very good on turn 0 as well. But we don't really want to see multiple copies of it, and we aren't overly reliant on this to end the game. Oftentimes, if our opponent is low, any attack reaction is going to kill them, because most people have realized by now that you don't beat Dorinthea in the ultra late game by overblocking. You basically have to make them have it. Finally, we have 1 copy of Chorus of Iron Song. So this is a new card from the latest set, and this card has been performing decently. Obviously, with the Unity, you can block with this plus a card and get a Courage token, which is not too bad. But The ability is also not bad at all either. You can, I mean, generally, if you're going to attack twice, this is worth at least 2 value. Sometimes you can get 3 value if you play it on a triple hit turn. And once in a while, the damage that would be dealt by Dawnblade cannot be prevented text is relevant against Sandcover, Oasis, the Angel Ward, and all that. And it's good to have this as a tutor target. Gives you some peace of mind. All right, let's talk about the energy suite here. Very standard energy suite, I would say, but the ratios are very, very specific here, although there's no abnormal cards, right? So we're playing 3 copies of Blue Warrior's Valor, 3 copies of Glint, 3 copies of Precision Press, 3 copies of Hit and Run. This just gives us Go Again in our energy base, and these are the best Go Agains that we have available. Driving Blade and Blade Flash are, number 5 and number 6, but given the current metagame and, ratios, those were cut. So we're playing those 12 there. In addition, we have 3 copies of Overpower Blue and 2 copies of Iron Song Response. Overpower Blue, one of the greatest cards if you're flooded on energy. Iron Song Response Blue is a backup for late game tutors. Also, 1 damage in the late game is often all you need to push through damage because oftentimes they have no D-reacts in the late game. We got 1 copy of Heart of Fendel. If you don't have Heart of Fendel, play a Time Snap Potion. If you can replace Heart of Fendel with a lot of different things, but I'd say the recommendation I would give most people is run a Time Snap Potion. And then we have speaking of potions, we have a single copy of an energy potion here. I was on 3 and then 2, and now I'm on 1. It feels like with the higher blue count and the less of a need to set up in general against the meta, energy potion has become less and less desirable. But having a single copy here, I still think is quite valid. And we basically have 2 cards that don't block here, which I think is fine. That's kind of the maximum that I want because the chance of seeing these at the same time is quite low. So yeah, that is the 56 cards that I would run in every single matchup. Let us talk about the sideboard and equipment next. So let's just take a look at that now. All right, guys, let's talk about the equipment and the sideboard for this deck. So the first thing to jump into, Dawnblade and the Decimator Great Axe. This is a very, very interesting evolution of this deck because this card, the Decimator Great Axe, has actually changed a lot of the matchups just because of the threat of this card. This is, in general, I will be running Dawnblade in almost every single matchup. But the Great Axe does give you the ability to play a style of deck that I think matches up better against decks like Bravo, Azuri, Fatigue Briar, and possibly Dory as well. Although I do think, in general, the Dawnblade Mirror is way more interesting than the Decimator Axe Mirror. So that's kind of a necessary evil here. Like, in general, if I static across a Dory, I'm going to say, hey, do you want to have an honorable Dawnblade matchup? So, but against Bravo, this obviously sidesteps Staunch Response really well, sidesteps all their D-reacts, and it puts them on a very quick clock. We have enough blues to support the deck, and although a lot of our attack reactions are very specialized, so things like Twinning Blade, Precision Press, Glistening Steel Blade, these things are not going to work on the axe. We can still block with those cards. We can still use those cards to, pitch for. And given that we have enough attack reactions, we can actually get the game to end in a reasonable amount of time. So one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that, oh, the Great Axe is a control style. No, the Great Axe is a value style that wants the game to end between turn 10 and 15. Dawnblade wants the game to end in general between turn 5 and 10. I don't think there really is a situation where Dorinthea wants the game to go over 15 turns in general. In the past, it was very common for the Dawnblade to drag on past turn 15, basically second cycle. But we don't need to do that now. If a deck is going to combat us with more than 6 D-Reacts, we should just be playing the Axe. For every other matchup, if they have low amounts of D-Reacts, or if they're a deck like Prism or Dromai, you're definitely going to want the Dawnblade, because this is not a very efficient weapon at clearing things. But yeah. TLDR, use Dawnblade for almost every matchup. Use the Decimator Axe against Bravo and Azuri. Possibly Briar, possibly Dorinthea. Okay, next we have Crown of Providence versus Nullrune Hood. Nullrune Hood, you play it against Vincent, Icelander, Kano, possibly Viserai. In every other matchup, you're running Crown. Of note, I would say that generally you want to save your Crown of Providence for later, if possible, because this allows you to arsenal anything you draw off of Steelblade Supremacy. It also allows you to, get out of jail free against Command & Conquer. So in general, I would save this card for. I would block with Crown of Providence later in the game if possible. All right, down here we have our classic Tunic versus Courage. Tunic matchups in general are the longer matchups, such as against Dromai, or matchups where we will bring in our shunts, such as Bravo, Azalea. In general, if you're bringing in, you're also playing a Tunic against the Wizards as well, obviously. Courage of Bladehold, in every single matchup that you're playing this in, you basically will never block twice with this. You are going to be using the effect on Courage of Bladehold to execute a triple hit combo, or to maintain aggression when you have counters on Dawnblade and you don't have pitch. One thing that you need to be very aware of in the current metagame is that if your opponent is attacking with a drill shot and has not played a 3 of a kind, so there is a threat of Rain Razors, do not block with your Courage of Bladehold, because it'll get blown up by the drill shot. So avoid that. But you definitely want to get value against Lexi before you pop the Courage for its effect. You just need to be careful. In the leg slot here, we have Braveforge Bracers and Refraction Bolters. I think these are both fairly standard, and I guess it's much more interesting for me to talk about why I am not playing Ironsong Versus and why I'm not playing Dynamos. So Ironsong Versus is very good in longer, grindier matchups. However, that's counterintuitive with the Great Axe, because the Great Axe cannot be targeted by Ironsong Versus. And Braveforge Bracers is just... the list is very, very, very tight, and Braveforge Bracers is like the universal, covers everything arm piece. As for why I don't play Valiant Dynamos, this list has a little bit less go again than normal. And I think against Dromai, you actually don't want the game to go that long. So being a little bit more aggressive in that matchup is to your benefit. Because you have to think very carefully about the way the Dromai deck is constructed. The Empress Dromai deck has a ton of 2 blocks in it. So being aggressive into that is generally how you win those matchups. If you're just sitting there playing defensively, clearing dragons, and letting, Flame Call Awakening into Blaze Headlong, into E-Strike, into Dragon, that's not how you win the game, right? Against that deck. You need to be fairly proactive. And against the big dragon style, if there's a turn where you don't have go again, this is going to bail you out. Dynamos is an excellent card against them, obviously, but the list is very tight, and I think that has kind of become a crutch. I think you can get away with just having bolters. All right. That is the equipment. Let us talk about the other sideboard cards. So like I said, we have 56 cards in the main board. So we're going to have to add at least 4 from the sideboard here. I guess the most straightforward ones to talk about are these here. There's 2 copies of Down and Dirty, 2 copies of CNC. Obviously, these operate as poppers, but CNC is also a pretty good card against decks that are a little bit more defensive, because you're able to attack with an attack that has go again, followed up with CNC is quite nice. Down and Dirty is a great card to put in Arsenal and kind of wait for the Dromai player to try to take tempo, and you could blow them out pretty bad with this. I found that 4 poppers is just the right amount. If you're playing very aggressively into Dromai, all you need is to see like 1 or 2 of these in the game. I think most games against Dromai will end about turn 8 to 10. So you're likely to see 2 of these. And if you could shut down 2 of their turns or pop 2 of their important dragons, this is, I think, just the right amount of defense. Of note, against Lexi, I'm not playing Command and Conquer at all. And you'll also notice that there's no Nourishing Emptiness in this list. This list is very, very dependent on Dawnblade, so we don't actually want to draw Nourishing in general. We want the whole deck to basically operate around Dawnblade. Okay. I guess let's talk about the Sharpened Steel here. So Sharpened Steel is a card that is good but not great. It is a card that we kind of use in the aggro matchups to create a smoother turn-to-turn experience. So Sharpened Steel plus Warrior's Valor often demands the whole hand from decks with lots of 2 blocks. And, it combines very well with a lot of things in the deck. But there are some downsides. This is one of the worst cards to play against Icelander, because it gives them a window, gives them information, and it's a red. It's also... this card opens you up to against Warmongers a little bit more as well. But, like I said before, decks don't feel quite right without Sharpened Steel, and that's why it's in the deck. This is often, in aggro matchups, we're often running the 3 Sharpened Steels plus a Sync Blow. For example, against Lexi, that's how I sideboard. And, it does its job. It does what it's supposed to do. Okay, in terms of defensive options, we have 9 defensive cards here. Sync Blow. I don't know what to say about Sync Blow that hasn't been said at this point. This is a very, very useful card against Bravo, against Azuri, in the mirror. It's a card that is okay against Lexi. Fixes your hands, and it it's a card that you're not unhappy to see when you load up your full deck against the more controlling matchups. 3 copies of Steelblade Shunt. Like I said, when we play Shunt, we play Tunic. This is the card that you want to park in Arsenal and kind of wait for your opponent to try to make a big turn, and this is one of the best ways to shut that down. Shuts down if you could shut down Bravo, you often just get a lot of tempo. Against Azuri, this is quite nice. It often forces them to use flick knives really early. Obviously, it's great against Azalea. Kind of gets around the... They have some cards that say you can't play D-Rex from hand, so you definitely want to put this in Arsenal. Great in the mirror, obviously. It's a good card, and it also deals 1 damage to some heroes, which is nice. Finally, we have 3 copies of Blue Steelblade Shunt. So this is a multi-use card, so against decks that we need to up our blue count, like against Icelander, this operates as a blue. Against decks where we need a little bit more defensive options, this operates as a defensive card. And, you know, against decks where sometimes we need the threat of killing them at 2, like against Dash, Steelblade Shunt is also very good because it says, hey, you can't drop down to 2 and just try to pistol me out because I will shunt you to death. So yeah, very, very flexible card, excellent card. I think with this brings our blue count closer to, I think, 23, which I think is, you know, where you want to be against Ice. Without them, you're closer to 20, which I think is fine in the aggro matchups because we run quite a few yellows, and in the aggro matchups, you're generally running Courage. And in the aggro matchups, you don't have to pay for large attack reactions quite often. So I think that the ratios in this deck make a lot of sense. All right. This is the equipment in Sideboard. Let us jump back to the deck tech. All right, guys, that is the deck tech for Dorinthea Ironsong that I used to get 14th at US Nats. Overall, I think the deck performed pretty well, and I'm very happy with the ratios in the deck. So for those of you who just want, you know, to see the deck and hear my choices or reasoning for my choices, thanks for watching. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the specific games that I had at US Nats. A lot of people wanted me to give, you know, a battle report for the weekend. So I'm going to talk about the 14 games that I played this weekend at US Nats. So round 1, I played against a Dorinthea. This actually happened to be one of my students. I do offer coaching. If you're interested in coaching, you can reach out for that on Discord or on Twitter. So yeah, I played against one of my students in a Dorimir. He was running a very, very aggressive version of Dorinthea that wasn't running any D-Reacts and wasn't running Tunic. And, you know, if you're not running D-Reacts, and that matchup could be very, very rough. Started off 1-0 there. Round 2, I played against Icelander, and this was one of my losses that I had in the tournament. Overall, I went 11-3, and this is a game that came down to the very, very end of the game, just missing a little bit of pitch at the very, very end of the game. And I felt like the game kind of dragged on a little bit too long. My opponent had very, very smooth Channel Mount Heroic draws, and I was never able... That's kind of the classics case of just not being able to execute a smooth offense against Icelander. And, you know, if you can't get their Cornet peak in a reasonable amount of time, often the game kind of goes bad for you. So, yeah, is what it is. Round 3, I played against Briar. This was a traditional Briar, and he just disrespected Glistening Steelblade to keep a Channel Mount Heroic turn, and I was able to, you know, deal with Briar. Generally, that's considered a harder matchup for Dory, but there's still some play that you can be had in that matchup. Round 4, I played against Icelander, and this is another game where everything just kind of fell apart. I had a very, very, very bad start, and again, the CMH or Channel Lake Frigid draws were really, really consistent. My opponent played very, very well, and it was very, very obvious he had played against Dorinthea a decent amount, and yeah, that was a tough one there. I think that was the worst loss I had against Icelander in quite a while. This was against a more arcane focused Icelander, which I think Bullander is actually easier for my deck to deal with because we run a decent amount of armor. And we don't, that means they're blocking for, they have a lot of 2 blocks in their deck. So Arcane Icelander is actually really, really difficult for Dory to deal with in general, I think. And it shows. So I got out of the first segment of CC22. Wasn't feeling too great about that. Won against Dory, lost against Icelander, won against Briar, lost against Icelander. But we went to the draft, and the draft, my seat was Bolton. The table kind of made some jokes before the draft that, oh, we have Josh Lau in our pod, so we're just gonna, not draft Bolton. So it ended up being that I think in pack 1 and 2 I was the only Bolton, and there was somebody that switched into Bolton in pack 3. So the table actually ended up correctly split. Well, not exactly correctly split. It was 1 Leviah, 3 Prisms, 2 Chains, and 2 Boltons. But my deck was significantly stronger because I started in Bolton, right? And one of the signs that I was the only Bolton at the table in pack 2 was in pack 2, pick 8. So that's the final pick before, you start seeing the wheel. I got past a Bolting Blade, which is a light warrior 7 power card, right? And as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, this draft is going to go pretty well, right? So I played 3 games of draft there. So I played against the solo Leviah. This one was a little bit tough. The Leviah cards are really, really, anytime a person in a pod is a solo, their deck quality is going to be very good. The Leviah was able to present, 35 cards, and, there were multiple, good cards like Endless Maw. But we barely got there. These draft games are kind of a blur because I played a lot of draft games over the weekend. I think I played like 6 at Nats, and I played like 12 or 13, 14 matches in practice up to the event. So sorry if some of the details are kind of sparse. So I played against a Prism in round 6. I don't really remember much about that. And then I played against a Chain in round 7, and I was able to win that as well. So I actually got out of the draft 3-0. I think it's mainly because I was the solo Bolton. I had a lot of take flights. I think I had like 4 or 5, I think. And in general, the more take flights you have as Bolton, the better, because the issue is that it's very hard to get guaranteed go again if you don't have things like Brandish, or Belittle Minnowism. The take flights basically allow you to go wide and utilize your whole hand, which is important. All right, so I end the day 5-2, come back the next day, and we sit down for, what is this, round 8. And I open my pack 1, and there is a Phantasmal Footsteps in my pack. And so I was like, all right, we're going to be a Prism Forcer. So we draft the Phantasmal Footsteps, and we take as many of Spears of Surreality and Wartune Heralds as we can get, because that allows us to go Spears into Wartune or Spears into Footsteps into Wartune, depending on if it gets popped or not. And we force Prism from the start. So, the people downstream to my left, they get off of Prism. There's clearly a Prism to my right, though, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. The issue with this, though, is that there were Leviahs and Prisms to my right. So the Bolton that was to my left got all the belittles and minnowisms that he wanted. And that kind of came back to bite me in one of the rounds. Okay, so after the draft, I'm feeling pretty good about my draft. I got, I think I had like 3 spears and several War Tune Heralds, a few, Heralds that I don't mind playing out as well, a few reds, and the deck overall blocks really well, so it's very likely that I can extend the game if I want to. So we play against the solo Chain in the Pod, and just at the end of the game, I think he makes a play where he doesn't spell void with his Ebb and Fold. He decides to use his Ebb and Fold, and he gets kind of flooded with blood deck cards. And I was able to, basically put him on 1 or 2, and then he couldn't clear all his blood debt, so he died. And then in the next round, I played it against the Bolton, and this is where passing all those belittle minnowisms to him kind of bit me in the ass. His deck just had a lot of value through the belittle minnowism, and Prism actually does not defend very well against Bolton because of the hero ability. And Prism runs all the attack actions, so it's not really not very, very easy for Prism. So we lose that one. But then we play Leviah in the final draft round, and we're able to get that one. The Phantasmal Footsteps come in huge in this matchup here. Every single time the Leviah is breaking anything, I can pay 1 and, send another Herald. And if Leviah is breaking 2 Heralds, that means Leviah is not turning off blood debt. And most Leviah decks don't have more than like 12-ish, 13-ish poppers. Also, this Leviah was a 1 of 3 Leviah, so I knew that this Leviah's deck was not quite as good as it could be. So we were able to get that one. So we leave draft, what is this? 5, 6, 7 and 2, and we head into the 7 and 3, and we head into the final portion of CC. So we are, around table 20 at the moment, and I sit down against my opponent who's playing Lexi. I look around, and I just see a lot of Lexi's, Icelanders, and Briars at the top tables. There weren't very many Dromais, there weren't very many Bravos, and any of the rogue decks weren't really there. So I was, definitely in that winner's metagame where, where I tuned my deck for this, so I felt, pretty okay about it. So I sit down against Lexi, and I really can't remember much about this game. It was either this Lexi game or the other Lexi game where I was able to get 6 Dawnblade counters in a row, or in a turn, by having Twitting Blade and double Glistening. And I had to play that hand out, in a very particular way, because I had to play a single Glistening, swing the Dawnblade with Courage active, just to, hide some cards in hand so that they wouldn't, have full information. I was able to play a Chorus of Iron Song and then get a counter, play a Glistening Steelblade, and swing again, threatening 3 counters. They don't block. I Twinning Blade it, and then I swing a 3rd time, threatening 2 counters. So they don't block the whole turn, and I get 6 Dawnblade counters. And from there, it's, pretty easy to win once you have 6 Dawnblade counters. So that's how one of the Lexi matchups went. I can't remember which one it was. It was either the round 11 or round 13. Round 12, I play against Briar. This is the more arcane-focused Briar. And the game was, a little bit slower, but I was able to get a very, very large turn with Steelblade Supremacy, with Dominate. And that basically closed it out. Iron Song Determination was really, really important in that matchup, because it allowed me to. One of the best plays Briar can make is 2-card block 7, 2-card block 8 with an embodiment, and that Iron Song Determination really just denies that whole possibility. Round 13, I play Lexi. I can't remember. Like I said, I don't know which Lexi game it was where I got 6 Dawnblade counters, but it was one of them. All right, so round 14, playing against Icelander. I don't feel too good about this because I obviously lost twice against Icelander. And I'm playing against one of the best Icelander players in the country. And yeah, so I kind of, take it slow. I figure out this Icelander's playing Bullander, so I try to, time my offense correctly. One of the weaknesses of Bullander is that in order to effectively use their hand, they often have to keep 2 cards, which means they're blocking with 2 cards, and generally blocking with 2 cards doesn't get it done against Dory. This is one of the situations where I actually made a mistake. I swung with Dawnblade, it hit. I swung again, and it hit. And I was just very surprised that the Icelander player gave me a counter, but I forgot to put the counter on the Dawnblade. This is, something that happens in round 14 when you're a little tired and when you're a little surprised that they're letting it hit. That can happen, right? So that actually came back to kind of make a big difference, because the next turn I didn't come in with a break point, and I could have got Quartet Peak on that turn. Instead, I get the Iron Rod Gauntlet. But the game goes down to the end. They were 1 resource short from killing me. That's the variance of Bullander, basically. So yeah, we end the tournament 11-3. Overall, I think the deck did pretty well, and I'm quite happy with how I piloted things in CC and in draft. Okay. We have talked about the deck. We have gone over the list. We have talked about the battle report. So I think we are done with all the topics for today. A couple of closing thoughts. I think Dorinthea is fine in this metagame. Obviously, you have to be very, very confident in your sideboard and very, very confident in your piloting to take her to a tournament. But if you're a Dory main, I wouldn't be too scared of this current metagame. You just need to be careful of your ratios in your deck, your go-agains, your blues, your attack reaction suite, and your threats. You need to, balance that all out. Yeah, I think it would be a fine choice to take to any nats. So yeah, if you're looking for the sideboard guide for the deck, that is available on the Patreon. If you're looking for coaching, you can PM me on Discord or on Twitter. And finally, we'd like to thank the sponsors for the trip to Las Vegas, FABREC.gg. If you're wondering what cards are good to pick if you're trying to build a deck, that is an excellent resource, and a resource that I use to build decks all the time. Check them out. They also have a lot of great articles there. So if you want something to read, they have quite a few articles there. Card culture. I think we have several shirts. We have a Lumina Go Boomina shirt. We have a Viscerized Pizzeria shirt. And we have a Iron Song shirt coming out soon. So be on the lookout for that. And finally, Dragon Shield, thanks to our 3 sponsors. We have a Patreon. We have a Discord. All the links are in the description below. All right. Overall, very, very happy with the Las Vegas trip. It was a lot of fun. Nice to meet a lot of, players and fans in Las Vegas. And I think that's a great city for US Nats. I'd be thrilled if 2024 Nats was in Las Vegas, actually. I think it's a great location for it. All right, this has been Josh Law, TheCardGuyz. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Have a good day. See ya.